welcome back to B&J's Little Farm. How's everybody doing? We are going to read Sweet September tonight. Share this out. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Since I got two in here watching, hello and welcome. Again, I'm reading Sweet September. Excuse me. We are on chapter 6. Christopher hurried past the barn to the tractor shed behind it. He opened the door just wide enough to light up the inside. His eyes darted around, looking for spiders before he walked in. He hated spiders. He dropped to his knees and pulled his treasure from behind the big yellow bucket. Christopher turned the metal thing over in his hands, studying its shape and size. Last night, when he was trying to fall asleep, his mind kept going faster than the speed of light, figuring out what it could be. Maybe it was an Indian pot for cooking. The only problem was he couldn't figure out how to get the food inside of it, or even worse, out of it once it was done. As he lay in bed in the dark and heard the sounds of something moving outside, he finally figured out what it was. It had to be a part of an old spaceship, and whoever lost it long ago had realized it was now found. An alien? They'd be good aliens, of course, because so far from what he's seen of Nebraska, everyone was nice. He stuck it back behind the bucket when he heard his grandma's voice calling him. He brushed off his pants and yawned. He was tired, that was for sure, but maybe if the aliens came back tonight, he could meet them. He was almost sure they were the ones who got into the garden, and maybe they'd have some idea where his dad is. After all, they could see the whole earth from outer space. Christopher grinned, imagining how happy Sam would be about that. Hey Vermont, good to see you. Christina, good to see you. Hey Steve, thank you all for coming in. He snuck back outside of the shed and hurried to find his grandma before she got too worried. She worried a lot, even though she never said so. He could see it in her eyes, just like how Mom had worried sometimes. In fact, there were days when Grandma looked at him and it seemed like she was Mom, since their look was so much the same. Grandma! He hurried away from the shed and towards her. He wrapped his arms around her. He smiled as she played with his hair, just like Mom used to do. You want to take a walk to the creek and show me the spot Grandpa jumped in? Can I bring the fishing pole Pete got me? Let me guess. Did he get that at the yard sale? Christopher shrugged. Guess so. Sure. I might even show you how to cast. You know how to fish, Grandma? He imagined her sitting in a boat and bringing in a big one like they did on those TV shows Uncle Pete liked to watch. Sure, I know a lot about fishing. The bigger the better. She reached down and wrapped one arm around his shoulder and then tickled him with her free hand. And then they flop and flop and flop, she said. Her fingers found the spot right in his armpit. How did she know where it tickled? Fact was, even if he caught a fish, there was no way he would cook it or especially eat it, but he didn't need to tell Grandma that. He'd keep it a secret. Christopher finally pulled away, sucked in a huge breath, and glanced back at the shed. It was just one secret, along with a few others. Hey, Firefly. You're just leaving the pool? Chapter 7. Dinner was finished, the kitchen clean. The girls had already headed upstairs with plans to give each other makeovers. Charlotte sat on the sofa and separated colored embroidery threads into neat rows on the coffee table in front of her. She could hear Christopher playing in the bathtub upstairs with his plastic dinosaurs. Some type of battle was ensuing between the T-Rexes and the Three Horns, or so Christopher called them. And she wasn't looking forward to the sight of the bathroom floor when he was done. No doubt more water would be out of the tub than in it. She was sure Christopher would never confess to playing with toys in the tub. He'd most likely deny it. It was only the battle sounds echoing from the bathroom and the soggy plastic toys dripping from the top of his dresser that told her the truth. She glanced up, noticing headlights coming down the driveway. In the hours, Pete and Sam had been gone. She'd related her conversation with Dana or Miss Simmons to Bob. And you let Sam head to town with Pete, her husband? Had asked. It was just one sentence, but she knew it held many implications. First, that such behavior shouldn't be rewarded. Second, that Pete, who hadn't finished school himself, wasn't exactly the best influence. Hey, Halloween Collector, thanks for coming in. Hey, Jen. She heard the sounds of Pete's truck parking outside and the voice of Sam and Pete as they unloaded supplies from the back of the truck, as if also remembering their conversation from earlier that day. Bob's gaze lifted from his Lamar novel, met Charlotte's gaze, and cocked a brushy gray eyebrow. Don't worry, she brushed a hand in the air. No more outings till the essay is done. I even have plans to stop by the library tomorrow to help Sam find some books on our lovely state. After the morning chores, of course. The rumble of Pete's engine started again. A minute later, Sam entered alone, kicking off his tennis shoes by the back door. He had a wrapped foil package in his hands, and a large smile filled his face. He says he'll be back sometime. Sam hurried to the fridge and placed what she assumed was leftover pizza on the top shelf, and then he moved to the stairs, most likely heading up to his room. Not so fast. Charlotte motioned him to the dining room table. We need to talk. He returned, head lowered. Sam tucked his hands into his baggy jean pockets and his shoulders slumped. He glanced up, his eyes barely visible under his floppy hair. He reminded Charlotte of a toddler who had just been caught with his hands in the cookie jar. She glanced at Bob, but he didn't seem quite as amused. Sam, aren't you going to ask what Miss Simmons was doing on the farm today? Sam lifted his arms, palms up, and shrugged. Paying a visit to an old friend? Or maybe about Emily? She tilted her chin, waiting for a better response. Oh, wait, Emily's in 9th grade, and she doesn't have Miss Simmons. He lowered his gaze. So maybe to talk to you about my essay? Yes. She sat her needlework on the table. And just what were you thinking? It's not my fault. His eyes met hers again, and his brow frowned. She told us to write a non-fiction essay about Nebraska. School only started last week, and they were already having us write essays? This place is nuts. Or maybe it's just so boring they think essays are fun. Besides, Miss Simmons said to be concise, or whatever that word is. There's nothing there's nothing more true or more concise than what I wrote. And you really thought we'd be okay with this? Bob put down his book and crossed his arms over his chest. Do you think disrespect and failure will be allowed? It's not like you're in 4th grade anymore. Being a junior in high school requires responsibility. Sam's eyes widened as if he realized for the first time that his grandfather was going to back up his wife. No, I guess not. Good, Charlotte nodded, because Miss Simmons is giving you a second chance, but this time only. You mean I have to write it again? More like actually write it by the end of the month, and it will be longer than the first 4 pages. Longer than the first 4 pages. A report on the good things about Nebraska. Sam's face scrunched in a scrawl. And it better be the best darn paper you'd ever written, Bob added. Yeah, whatever. He retreated, hurrying upstairs. Charlotte closed her eyes. Questions and concerns filled her mind. The kids had only been around for a few months. How would she and Bob ever make it until they were grown and gone? Heaviness settled on her, almost pressing her shoulders down. She failed the first time. Denise had been a pregnant runaway, and Pete hadn't even graduated. The only one who'd done well was Bill, their oldest son, and he rarely came around. What did that say about her parental achievements? What made her think she'd do a better job this time? Maybe you're right. Maybe he doesn't need to hang out with Pete so much. She leaned back on the couch, her interest in needlework diminished. Yeah, well, we'll have to keep an eye on that, Bob yawned and rose. But enough for tonight. I need to hit the hay. Morning comes early, and I need to get the old combine fired up. Stupid machine was giving me fits. Though his words sounded like a complaint, Charlotte knew the truth. The work tired him, but he was happiest when he was in the fields bringing in the harvest. She's decided long ago that being able to physically reap the rewards for one's hard work was something every man should experience. Sure, well, I'm going to get Christopher tucked in and then bid the girls a good night. Even as she said the words, they still didn't seem part of her reality. It was almost like she was playing house, even though the kids' presence and their longevity in the household was all too real. She turned off the lights, made sure the doors were locked, and headed upstairs. She usually wasn't one to lock the doors, but she had to admit the vegetables missing from the garden bothered her. Christopher had already dried off, dressed, and climbed into bed when she arrived to say prayers with him and read him a chapter from a book of his choice. Currently, it was Little Stuart. Their nightly ritual was a new habit, to be sure, but one they both enjoyed. Night, she kissed Christopher's forehead, breathing in his scent that still hinted of boy, despite the bath. She turned off the light and closed the door so that it was open just a crack. Charlotte turned to Emily's room. The door was ajar, and she paused in the doorway. Instead of the loud laughter from a minute before, the girls were laying on their backs on the carpet. Their faces with blue eyeshadow and pink lipstick gave evidence of makeovers. Each girl's leg was propped in the air as she painted her toes. Charlotte had never seen anyone paint her toes like that, but she was even more intrigued by their conversation. I just don't get it. Emily blew as if her breath could reach the wet paint on her toes. I don't get it why you call Pepsi and stuff pop. Rice Krispies pop doesn't, soda doesn't. Yeah, well, When you say soda, I think of baking soda. You know, the kind you use when you're baking a cake? No, I've never used that stuff. Ashley lifted her head slightly. You're kidding. You've never baked a cake? Of course I've baked a cake. The mixes I've used never called for anything called soda. You make box cake? Ashley's voice was no more than a loud whisper. Her face appeared as horrified as if Emily had just announced she'd robbed a bank. Yeah, well, maybe we didn't have time in California to make stuff from scratch because we had too much fun stuff, like the beach and mall and arcades. There were even mountains to hike, and my mom used to take us there. With the mention of Denise, both girls quieted. Charlotte took a step back, realizing they still hadn't seen her. Emily cleared her throat. Yeah, well, like I was saying, I don't know why anyone would want to stay in Nebraska forever. There's no ocean, no mountains, not to mention all the potholes, and no place to shop. I don't know. I kind of like it. I like racing lambs. I like 4-H. I like being able to hang out at Heather Creek all day without having to worry about carjackings and stuff. Let's just agree to disagree. Emily's voice was firm. As soon as I'm old enough, I'm out of here, just like Sam. Nothing here worth keeping me around. The words jabbed Charlotte's heart like a butcher knife, just like your mom. I'll be sad if you do, but at least it will give me some place to visit. I've never been to San Diego. She'd heard enough. Charlotte cleared her throat and entered. Okay, girls, time for bed. She hugged her waist, pretending she hadn't heard, and offered her best smile. After your polisher's dry, of course. Emily sat up, startled. She looked at Charlotte, her gaze filled with questions. Charlotte glanced away. Christopher has gone to bed, and I suggest you do the same. Morning will come soon. She turned and exited, realizing that she hadn't prayed with Emily as she had just started doing. But for the life of her, she couldn't make herself return to that room. Instead, Emily's words replayed in her mind. Nothing here worth keeping me around. Alright, you guys. We did 2 chapters tonight, and we will start on chapter 8 next Saturday. I want to thank you so much for coming out and listening to these 2 chapters. I want to remind you that you're not alone. You are loved. Stay happy, healthy, and safe. And I will see you Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys have a good one. Night.